In this episode, we're going to now send our prompts to our backend that we created in the previous episode. So we're going to use the package, the DO package that we installed in the beginning of the tutorial. We'll create a file called api.dat that will handle everything to do with the HTTP client. So let's import the package. Once that's done, we're going to create a class called HTTP service. Inside it, we're going to define a variable of type DO. And then we're going to create a simple function called init with a type future HTTP service where we will configure or set the base options. The base options is one of the properties of DO, where you set certain options like the base URL and all. So that's where we're going to do it. Depending on the options that have been passed, they'll be defined inside the variable that we have defined or declared, sorry. Then now we're going to create our function, the request function, which will handle the post method and interaction and receiving the response from the backend. So our request function will have an async feature, because inside we're going to have an await operation. So our request will require a few parameters. It will require an endpoint. The base URL will be set in the base options, but then the endpoint will be set in our request function. Then the parameters or the JSON object that will hold, or our map string dynamic variable that will hold our request parameters. Okay, next we're going to define a variable called response of type response. This is what's going to hold the response that we receive from the backend. We create our try and catch. Our catch will just will throw a simple exception like something went wrong. With a text something went wrong. Then in our try, inside here is where we're going to define our response by setting it as do await do dot post. Then we pass the required parameters, which is the endpoint. In our backend, it was the endpoint was request, and then we also pass the data, which will be a JSON object of the params that will be passed, which will set it later on, as you shall see. We'll import the data.convert for it to be able to perform the json.encode. So we're doing a small check. If response.status code is equals to 200, that means the request has gone through successfully. We return the response.data. Else, we're going to throw a simple exception, same as the previous one. Done. So that's our simple service that we're going to use, our class that we're going to interact with within our project. So we go to our screens. We'll be using it in our playground screen, because that's where we are initiating a request on the send button, if you recall. So we're going to define, create an instance of the HTTP service. Great. And then we're going to use that instance and work with it within the project, specifically on the onPressed function for the send button. So we'll call the init and specify the base options, starting with the base URL. We'll set our base URL on the constants.dat file. We'll use the port 2000 as set in the backend as well. So we'll pass that base URL, and then we'll also pass another property of content type. So expect application JSON. Great. Next, now we're going to call our request function. So we'll set a variable that will receive whatever will be returned from the request function. So we'll say http service.request. We'll pass our endpoint as request. If you recall, that same endpoint was set in the backend. Then our params will be a JSON or a map string dynamic with a string or the key prompt, and then it will pass will pass whatever the user has entered in the prompt text field. So we'll need to set a controller on the text field, define it at the top. Prompt controller. Great. So we'll pick that and pass it here, and then remove const. Just pass it in where it's needed, and then pick that prompt controller and pass it in as a value for the key prompt. Great. That's where you'll find in the backend now, that's where the prompt key, we were passing rec.body.prompt, because we'll be passing a JSON object with a key prompt. Great. So what we want to do is, when we get the result, which will be in the final response variable, we want to set it to, instead of setting the dummy completion, we want to set whatever OpenAI Codex model has returned to us. So we're defining a string called completion and setting it on the animated text kit, so that when we get the response, we do a set state where we set the completion to whatever has been received. So if we try and test that, all that we have created, as shown, rec.body.prompt. Great. But now we are formatting our prompt a little bit. As I said before, prompt engineering can be quite complex. So with the dummy prompt that we had set, however much it's returning a result, it's not returning a defined I had to fine tune it a little bit. So what we're doing is we're just improving the prompt a little bit, in a way that we're going to pass a value of widget, and we're also going to pass the prompt. So this rec.body.widget, we're going to pass it from the front. But what we're going to do now on the front, we're going to ask the user to select a widget. For now, we're going to just set a drop down with only the text widget, so that when it comes here, it will be the rec.body.widget will define the text that whatever the user has selected, which will be text. And then if you'll see that in the next part of the prompt, we're going to pass opening brackets, and then we're going to pass a comment that and enter the comment symbol and enter that. What we're trying to say, we're trying to tell the model that the language that we need is the that language, and then we are passing another comment that will hold now the request the prompt itself. So instead of the whole dummy prompt that we had, we're just making it simpler for the user. You'll see how simple it is, because the prompt will be, part of that prompt will be generated for the user, and all they have to do is just add a few things to improve it. So we have changed the prompt a little bit, so it will be getting the request, the widget that we'll need, and it will be passing the language that we're going to be using, and now the prompt that we're going to be passing again from the front end. Instead of letting the user to enter all that, let's just make it easy for them. So let's restart our node server and then head back to our project. Our app side, since we changed the port, we'll just change the port here as well. Great. So we'll need to, before the enter prompt, we'll need to add a drop down, and that's what I'm talking about. That part where we said rec.body.widget, instead of letting the user just enter the whole text, let's just allow them to now select the widget that you want. Cool. Once you've selected, we generate a part of the prompt for you, and then you just fill in the rest. But for this tutorial, we're just going to add one widget, which is a text widget. We can continue adding later on. So our drop down will be quite simple. So we'll just have a simple drop down with a drop down value set to empty. So string is equal simple, then we set it to give it a null check. Great. And then now we're going to create a list that will hold a string that represents some of the widgets that we have in Flutter, but for this tutorial I'm just going to add the text only. But we can add text, elevated button, you can add text input field and all, but let's just add text first. And then we have added a prompt. We are setting the prompt. When you select the drop down, we'll prepare the prompt. We'll start the prompt for you by saying create whatever widget that you've selected widget with. So we've already started the prompt for you, which will be much easier. So the rest is just adding the properties and the like. So yeah, basically that's it. So from the back end, you'll find that the widget that you've selected, for example, text, so it will be text opening brackets. The first comment will be Dutch, telling the model we are working with a Dutch language. Then the next comment will be this statement, create text widget with whatever now the user will add. Great. So after that, let's see. We're just changing the dummy prompt. It's no longer a dummy prompt, it's just a hint text now. We're just telling the user select a widget to create at the top, because the drop down will be before the text widget enter prompt. So if we try again, as you can see, the drop down will be the first one. Yep. With the first so the idea is once you select the type of widget, let's fill it up. Okay, and then let's add a text on top because it's quite blank. Yes, the drop down, you can see the icon that shows the drop down, but to direct the user, we can just enter a text widget that says select widget. Great. And then there's a drop down where they'll select, and then they'll be able to finish their prompts. As you can see, we selected the text, a prompt was already generated. We have a generated prompt that has been started. Then the user just needs to add the other properties that they want for that specific widget. Next thing, now on our request that we pass the JSON, we'll pass the widget key that will hold the whatever the user has selected. We need to pass this because that's expected on the backend, so that now we can push our requests and see. So it was important to define the prompt properly before we push the request. So now we have our prompt started, and we're just adding with title, coding AI, and color red. If we send, our completion should change from hello world to now a new completion. If we try again, there's an error, something went wrong. Let's see, let's try again. So if we select text, our prompt has been generated. We proceed to enter what we want, which is a title, coding AI, color red. If we click on send, there's still okay. Let's see. Proceed to a backend. We can see the rate limit reached 4. Okay, so we can just what you do in case you get this, you can just generate a new key. So because that's what I did, I just generated a new key and replaced it with the one that I had, because this tends to happen. It will actually happen more often, considering that this is a free version that we're using. So if we try and restart the server again and try one more time, the completion that says text hello world should change to the completion that we'll receive from the OpenAI Codex. Awesome. So now we have our completion. This is coming directly from OpenAI Codex, and it's actually printed the correct code for a text widget with a title, coding AI, color red. Very cool. Despite it being in but now you find that I've added the prompt and sent again. It's now bringing for me the widget in form of a text span, which shouldn't be the case. And I think this is where we'll have challenges with the beta version. But yeah, we have officially interacted with OpenAI Codex, which is really awesome. So see you on the next one.